The candles burned softly that night. The room smelled of roses and perfumed. Everyone outside whispered, "Tonight will be the most beautiful night of her life." But they were wrong, because that night didn't give me love, it took away my voice. My name is Leila, and this is not a love story yet. As the story of how a girl's silence became her prison. From the outside, everything looked perfect, a grand wedding. Smiling faces, golden lights, and music. But behind the red veil was a heart that never said yes. No one asked me what I wanted. No one cared what I felt, because in my world, a daughter's choice is never hers to make. They called it tradition. They called it family honor, but what they really gave me was a cage wrapped in silk. I entered that decorated room as a bride, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own life. The bed was covered in flowers, air filled with blessings, and yet my heart beat like a drum of fear. I waited for love, I waited for tenderness, but what came instead was silence, a silence so heavy it broke something inside me. He didn't look at me, he didn't speak, he simply turned off the light and turned away, leaving me in a darkness I had never known. Before that night, I realized something no one had told me. Marriage without love doesn't bring joy, it brings emptiness. In the days that followed, I learned to smile in front of others and cry alone at night, to cook and clean, to obey, and pretend to live a life chosen by others. But each night when the house slept, my heart whispered the same question: is this what love is supposed to feel like? Because my body was married, but my soul was still searching for warmth, for words, for someone who would see me as a person, not a duty. This is the truth no one talks about, truth hidden behind bright weddings and perfect photos. The truth of girls like me who smile in daylight but break in silence at night. And this was only the beginning of my story, a story of love that never came, a story of a cage that looked like a home, a story of a girl who finally found the courage to speak after a lifetime of being told to stay quiet, because some nights don't give you memorias, they give you scars, and mine still whisper, "You deserve love." I grew up in a home where silence was considered respect and obedience was called love. From a young age, I was taught to lower my eyes, to speak softly, and to never question what elders decided. My family was traditional, proud, religious, respected. They taught me many things: how to cook, how to pray, how to serve tea when guests came, but they never taught me how to choose, even as a little girl. I dreamed differently. I used to sit by the window and watch romantic films on TV, stories where love began with a smile, where two people understood each other, where marriage was a promise made by hearts, not by families. I wanted that. Not luxury, not gold, not a big house, just a love that would make me feel safe. But in my house, dreams were like flowers pressed inside a book, beautiful but never allowed to bloom. When I finished my studies, I hoped to work, to build a small career, maybe to travel. But one evening, everything changed. My father called me to the living room. My mother was sitting beside him, her eyes soft but distant. My heart already knew something was coming. He said, "Leila, we've made a decision. You are getting married next month." I froze. "Married? To whom?" "To your cousin," he said calmly. "It's already decided. The families have agreed." My lips trembled. "But I haven't even spoken to him." My mother interrupted softly. "Leila, love comes after marriage. Trust us. We know what's best for you." That night, I cried silently into my pillow. No one asked me if I was ready. No one asked if I wanted him. It wasn't about love. It was about family honor, about tradition, about keeping the bloodline pure. And in our world, a daughter's voice was too small to be heard. The wedding preparations began the next day. Relatives arrived with gifts, gold bangles, and congratulations. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone except me tried to smile in front of them, but my heart felt heavy, like I was walking toward a life I didn't choose. On the wedding day, they dressed me like a queen, a red bridal dress, shining jewelry, henna covering my hands. People called me beautiful. Cameras flashed, music played, but behind the veil, My eyes were full of tears. I looked at my parents one last time before leaving for my husband's house. I wanted to say, please, let me stay. I'm not ready. But I stayed silent because in my world, daughters don't say no, they just obey. Even when their hearts are breaking, when I reached my new home, everyone welcomed me warmly, smiles, laughter, teasing. The air was full of celebration, but inside, I felt like a guest in someone else's story. And then came the night everyone was waiting for, the first night. The room was decorated, beautiful rose petals scattered on the bed, candles glowing softly, perfume in the air. It looked like a scene from a dream, but my heart was racing. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, my mind full of questions. Would he talk to me gently? Would he hold my hand? Would this be the beginning of love? The door opened, he entered. My husband, the man I barely knew, he looked tired. His face serious, he didn't smile. He didn't say anything. He just sat on the chair and began scrolling through his phone minutes. Passed like hours. I tried to speak, but no words came out finally. He stood up, turned off the light, and lay down beside me. Without a word, without a glance, I turned my face to the wall, tears filling my eyes. The night that everyone said would be magical felt cold, and lifeless. I felt invisible. Like a body without a soul. That night I realized something no one had ever told me: marriage without love is not romance. It's silence. It's two strangers lying in the same bed, worlds apart in the morning. Relatives teased us, laughing. So, how was the night? I forced a smile and said nothing, because how do you explain emptiness to people who only see your jewelry days past? We lived under the same roof, shared the same meals, the same bed, but not the same heart. When I tried to talk to him about dreams, books, life, he stayed quiet, distracted, distant. When I asked for affection, he gave none. When I asked for love, he said it will come later, but later never came. Nights became longer, heavier. Sometimes he touched me, but it felt like duty, not desire. I lay there like a statue, wishing he would see my soul. Not just my body, but he never did. Started to feel like a stranger in my own mariachi, a guest in a house where love had no room. One night, I gathered the courage to ask him, do you even love me? He laughed softly and said, love will come later. For now, do your duty as a wife. His words shattered something inside me. Was I just a responsibility? A name on a family list? Where was the kindness? The warmth? The connection I had dreamed of? Began to see the truth that some marriages look perfect from the outside, but inside they are filled with silence, sadness, and loneliness. Each morning, I wore my smile like armor. Each night, I removed it like a mask, and behind closed doors, I cried quietly for the love that never came, for the choice I never had, for the voice I never used. My parents visited 1 week later. My mother asked, are you happy? I smiled weakly. Yes, Alma, because in our world, a daughter's pain is less important than a family's peace. But deep inside, I made a promise to myself: if I ever speak, I will speak the truth that a wedding without love is not a blessing. It's a burden. The truth that a beautiful dress cannot hide a broken heart. The truth that marriage is not about control. It's about connection. And that night, the one everyone celebrated, was the night that broke my illusions forever. It wasn't a beginning, it was the start of a prison built with silence. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but nothing changed. Our marriage stayed like a book with empty pages now. Warmth, no laughter, no story worth remembering. We lived together, but we were miles apart. He was my husband by name, but a stranger. In every other way. Each morning I woke up to silence. No good morning, no smile, just the sound of footsteps and doors closing. He left for work without looking back, and I stayed behind. A bride turned into a shadow. I filled my days with chores, cooking, cleaning, pretending, and each night I lay beside him, wondering if love would ever find its way to us. But love never came. The Silence in our room was heavier than walls. It pressed against my chest until breathing felt like effort. Sometimes he touched me, but only because he thought he had to like a ritual, a duty, not a connection. His hands were cold, his eyes distant, and each time I felt smaller, emptier, less human-y. Tried to talk to him gently, kindly. Do you want to go out, maybe for dinner or a walk? He would sigh and say I was tired if I asked about his day. He gave short answers. If I spoke about dreams, books, or love, he stayed silent, and slowly that silence became my cage. I began to realize something painful. A woman can be married and still feel completely alone. I had a husband, but not a partner. I had a house, but not a home. At night when the city slept, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question over and over. Is this what marriage is meant to be? One night, I gathered my courage and asked him directly, do you even want me? Do you feel anything for me at all? He looked at me for a moment, then said quietly, Leila, I didn't want this marriage either. Our parents decided. We are just living their choice. Don't expect love. It may never come. His words were like a blade, soft but deadly. I turned away, hiding my tears. In that moment, I understood I wasn't only unloved, I was unwanted. After that night, I stopped asking, I stopped hoping. I wore my smile during the day like armor, but inside I was breaking piece by piece. I began to move through life like a ghost, doing everything expected of me, but feeling nothing. I laughed when people laughed. I smiled for photos, but every time I looked in the mirror, I saw emptiness. In my own eyes, relatives praised us. They looked so happy. They said no one saw the distance between us. No one heard the silence that screamed behind closed doors. Sometimes my mother-in-law asked with a knowing smile, so how is he at night? Is he good too? I wanted to scream the truth, that there was nothing good, nothing gentle, nothing warm, but instead I just nodded, because in our world, a daughter-in-law doesn't complain, she accepts. But acceptance was slowly killing me. Began to write at night when everyone slept. In the pages of a small diary, I poured out everything I couldn't say aloud. The loneliness, the emptiness, the pain. My diary became my only friend, the only place where I could be honest. I wrote lines like, I am a wife without love, a bride without choice. Marriage without love is worse than loneliness. I am living but not alive. Writing gave me a strange kind of strength that reminded me that my voice still existed, even if no one wanted to hear it. As time passed, I began to see the truth, not just of my life, but of many others. I thought of the girls in my community life, ones who wore heavy bridal dresses and smiled for photos, but whose hearts cried in silence. How many of them lived like measuring a bed with someone who didn't love them, calling it destiny, calling it duty. The truth was cruel. So many marriages were built on family pressure, not mutual choice, and behind the curtains of respect and tradition, so many women were silently suffering. I started to notice how people talked about love. They said it was a luxury, not a necessity, that a good woman doesn't demand affection. She serves quietly, she obeys, she endures. But I knew that wasn't love. That was survival. One day, I tried to talk to my husband again. I told him we can try to build something. We can talk, understand each other. He shook his head and said, it's useless. This is our fate. His voice was calm but cold. I realized then he had already given up. He didn't want to try, and I couldn't build love alone. The nights grew colder. The bed felt larger. Even when he lay beside me, I felt completely alone. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, turn toward him, and whisper in my heart, please, just look at me once, see me. But his eyes always stayed closed. My heart began to harden, not from anger, but from exhaustion. I stopped expecting love. I started protecting my soul. I focused on myself, on small things that gave me peace, reading books, writing in my diary, praying for strength. I found moments of comfort in silence, but even that silence carried the weight of what I had lost. One evening, I overheard my mother talking to a relative on the phone. She looks happy, she said proudly. Her husband takes care of Harry. Wanted to tell her the truth that I was not happy, that I was barely holding on, but I stayed quiet because sometimes truth hurts the people who love you most inside. Mia Fire was growing a fire of awareness, of understanding how many girls live this same story we are told to dream of marriage, but no one tells. Use that love cannot be forced, that without love marriage becomes a kage beautiful from the outside, but empty within each night. I wrote in my diary hoping one day someone would read it and understand. I didn't know when or how, but I promised myself that my silence would not last forever because I had begun to see love is not a reward, it is a right, and no woman should have to beg for it. Time passed, but the emptiness inside me stayed the same. Days turned into routine, cooking, cleaning, pretending. Every smile I gave felt borrowed, every breath felt heavy. I began to wonder if this was how my whole life would pass, living beside someone who didn't see me, serving a family that didn't ask if I was happy, and hiding behind a silence that was slowly killing me. But one night everything changed. It was a quiet evening. The house was asleep. I sat near the window with my diary in handwriting. The same words I had written so many times before. Marriage without love is a prison, silence is its chain. As I wrote, a single tear fell on the page. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in truth. For the first time I looked around and truly saw my life. I realized I wasn't living, I was surviving. That night, I made a promise to myself I would no longer be silent. If I couldn't find love, I would at least find my voice. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, but behind them burned a new light, the light of awareness. I wasn't weak. I wasn't cursed. I was simply a woman who had been denied her right to choose, and that truth gave me strength. I began to speak more, first to myself, then in small ways to others. I talked to my mother on the phone and gently told her, "Amma, I'm not happy yet." First she was quiet, then she sighed. "Leila, happiness comes with patience." I wanted to believe her, but I knew patience could not create love days. Later, I gathered the courage to talk to my husband one last time. I told him calmly, we can't live like this anymore. If this silence is destroying us both. He didn't argue, he just looked away. That was my answer. Love cannot be built from one side. After that day, I stopped pretending. I stopped dressing up for him. I stopped forcing smiles at family gatherings. I focused on myself, reading, writing, praying. And the more I wrote, the clearer my truth became. A woman's life is her own, not a gift to be given away. Months passed, and one day, my father came to visit. When I saw his face, all my strength melted. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "Papa, I am not happy. Please take me home." He looked at me shocked. "Leila, what happened?" Tears filled my eyes. "Please just trust me." That evening he spoke to my husband and his family. They tried to explain, to blame. Maybe my father didn't listen. He said firmly, "My daughter deserves peace." And with that, he took me home. When I stepped outside the house, I felt the wind on my face, and for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. The cage was behind me, had lay an unknown road, but at least it was mine at home. I gave my father the diary. I said softly, "Read this when you're Alani. Will understand everything I couldn't say." That night I slept in my old room now. Whispers, no pressure, no cold silence beside me, just peace. The next morning, when I woke up, sunlight poured through the window like a blessing, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled without pretending. When my father read the diary, was silent for a long time. Then he came to me with tears in his eyes and said, "Leila, I'm sorry. We thought we were protecting you, but we forgot to ask what you wanted." I hugged him tightly. His words healed something deep inside me. In the weeks that followed, he went to the elders, spoke to the community, and he made sure no other girl in our family would be forced into marriage. Again, my story became a mirror for others, a painful truth they could no longer ignore. I started sharing my story with other women, quietly at first, then more openly. I met girls who whispered the same pain I didn't choose. I can't speak, I feel trapped, and every time I heard their words, I Told them what I had learned in silence is not safety, silence is surrender love. Cannot be forced marriage without choice is not sacred, it's suffocating. I began to write. Articles speak at local women's groups and share my story online, not to shame anyone in. To tell the truth that too many hide, and slowly I found purpose in my pain today. When I look back, I don't remember the wedding lights or the gold jewelry. Don't remember the laughter of relatives or the sound of music. I only remember the silence of. Silence that taught me the value of my own voice. That silence became my teacher. It showed me what love is not. It taught me that respect cannot grow in a cage and that a woman's worth is not measured by obedience but by the courage to speak her truth. Now I tell every girl I meet, don't let anyone decide your life for you. Your heart is not a family trophy. Your marriage is not a deal between names. You deserve a choice, you deserve respect, you deserve love. And to every parent I say, listen to your daughters, because a wedding without her consent is not a celebration. It's a funeral of her dreams. Love should never be commanded. It should be chosen freely, fully, joyfully. My journey was not easy, but it made me stronger. It gave me my voice, and now I use that voice to help others find theirs, because I've learned one thing: a woman's silence may protect family honor, but her truth can save generations. And that truth, one I once feared to speak, has finally set me free.